Good morning. God, are you hungover or what? Bloody hell. How's it going? Yeah? Good. Excellent. Thank you very much for having me back. It's so nice to be here in Sydney. My name's Ben Hammersley, for those of you who've never seen me before. I'm a futurist, which is a terrible job title. I'm employed to live a couple of years in the future and then come back and tell you all about it. And one of the things you might not know, but in 2017, PowerPoint is going to be made a war crime. So I don't have any slides, and I'm going old school. I know, it's pretty awesome. I can't read my handwriting, though, so every so often I'm going to stop and look really wise, Elephant? What? Okay, yeah. Last time I was here, I spoke about augmentation and cyborgs and how to become a cyborg. It's the sort of thing that I'm really into. Given the opportunity to inject something into myself that'll go beep, then I will take it. But that was a couple of years ago, and since then, the world has changed quite radically. Computing power has actually doubled twice since I spoke at Wired for Wonderlust. We now have computers 4 times as powerful as the ones we did then, for example. And so it's become very clear in the past couple of years what it is that we're talking about when we talk about these sorts of cyborgy, robot-y, augmented person technologies. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. But first, let's recap some first principles. Let's get into some microelectronic engineering. I know that you're all up for it this time of the morning. The most important thing to bear in mind, and I would suggest that this is perhaps the most important fact of your existence, is a thing called Moore's Law. For those of you who don't remember, Gordon Moore was the co-founder of Intel. They're the people who make the microchips. And in the early 60s, he looked at the chips that they were making, and he realized that there was a curious pattern. That roughly every year, for the same price, they could fit twice as many components onto a microchip as they could the year before. That roughly every year, for the same amount of money, computing power doubled. That was true in the early 60s, it was true in the 70s, true in the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. It's true today. We think it will continue to be true for at least another 10 or 20 years. Computing power doubles every year or so. Which is why I can stand up here in the big green circle of knowledge and talk about computing power having gone up 4 times since the last time I was here. Because it has. I mean, you all know this almost instinctively. It's the reason, for example, that in a couple of weeks' time, Tim Cook of Apple is going to stand on a stage very much like this in San Francisco and instantly make the phone in your pocket shit. It's terrible, really. But that computing power, we don't really hear about it so much anymore. And 10 years ago, 20 years ago certainly, when I started out as a technology journalist in the Times newspaper in London, you would continuously write about the power of microchips. The first, Windows 95, for example, came out 20 years ago earlier this week. And I bought a new machine for Windows 95. It was a Pentium 75. At the time, this was the sexiest thing in the world, right? Girls loved me for it. Men were jealous of me for it. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. It is now basically impossible to buy a computer that bad. The Raspberry Pi, which is a little $20 computer that they hand out in schools now, is about 4 times as powerful as my Pentium 75. And so we would write and continuously write about the chip speed and the power of these machines. And you would read in adverts for computers, you would always see, how fast the processor was and how many cores the processor chip has and all of that. And now we don't talk about it anymore because they've become so powerful that it's really not worth talking about. Instead, we've realized that the computing power that we have is actually all about data. It's all about the stuff you can do with that computing power, the way that you can manipulate information. And data is really weird. It's something that we as humans, and it's something that we as business people especially, have a huge problem coming to terms with, the weirdness of data. Take a good example of that. Unlike a physical object, data can be reproduced perfectly an infinite number of times, basically for nothing. And that weird fact about data kind of destroyed the music industry. In the olden days, the music industry made objects, CDs and vinyl and so on. And to copy a CD into another CD required a physical object. To copy a vinyl record required another physical object. And you could make tape-to-tape copies, for example, but they would get worse and worse every time you did another generation of copying. But once it became data, once music became MP3, it just became information, then you could copy that information an infinite number of times perfectly at zero cost. So data is really odd. The second weird thing about data is it doesn't really matter where that data is held. It doesn't matter where it physically is. This is something that the banking industry has got to come to terms with very soon. In the old days, it was really easy to know where your money was because it was the bag of coins under your bed, right? Or the block of gold in the safe, or the diamonds hidden in your body orifices, whatever it is, wherever it is you kept your money, right? You knew where it was because it was in a place. But once money became digital, it could be anywhere. And that completely opens up the industry quite radically. And it's only by laws that that isn't the case yet. So data has weird physical properties in that you can copy it and you can make perfect copies infinitely for free, and it has location inspecivity. It doesn't really matter where that information is. In fact, many of you, for example, have probably got Gmail accounts. And because of that, you have literally no idea where your email is physically. It's hosted by Gmail in one of their data centers somewhere in the world. And there's no way for you to find out where that information actually is. But the weird thing about that is that because Google's servers optimize themselves at all the time, it's actually impossible for Google to tell you where your email actually is. They've no idea. It's just somewhere in their system. Could be anywhere. So data is really odd. But the third thing that makes data really odd is that it really likes to make connections. A small bit of data on its own is desperate to meet other data. It's gagging for it. And once it meets other data, it makes as many connections as it possibly can. There have been two major data breaches in the past few months. You may have heard of them on the news. The first one was the American government. They have the Office of Personnel Management, which is their HR department for all of the American government, including the CIA, weirdly. And they had all of their personnel records, including all of the security clearances and all of the data about who was, who was cleared to be top secret and super secret and who was an assassin and all of that, right? Big database. And that was broken into a few months ago, and probably that whole database was taken probably by the Chinese. And taking it, when I say taking it, of course it's data. They just copied it perfectly. They didn't literally just go and get the filing cabinet and remove it from the office. They just made a copy of it. And the second thing, of course, is Ashley Madison. Now, nobody here will have ever heard of Ashley Madison, I'm sure. But it was a database, it was a dating site where if you were wanting to have an affair, you could go on there, and it was very discreet, apparently. You could sign up for an account, and it would match you with like-minded men or women for a discrete adult liaison. And they were hacked a couple of weeks ago, and the whole database was leaked onto the internet a few days ago. And we know for a fact, because you're going to do it if you can, the Chinese Secret Service, or whoever it is who has the database of all of the spies, will have downloaded the database of all of the people who want to have an affair, and right now are trying to work out how to industrialize blackmail. Because they want to be able to connect all these things together. Now, actually, an interesting thing about that database is that since it came onto the online a couple of days ago, people have been doing a lot of analysis of it. You know, the first few hours, it was basically searching for it for all of your friends' email addresses. I'm not on here. No, good. Okay. But actually, there's been a lot of data journalism, and literally just now, before I came on stage, I was seeing the latest analysis, which is where they looked through it and worked out who was a real person and who wasn't. And it turns out that there were actively 20 million men, male members. I don't want to say members. That's a bad... Subscribers? Yeah. Male subscribers on Ashley Madison. And at best guess, there were around about 1,000 women. Just as an aside, I thought that was brilliant. Anyway, so they had a lot to choose from. And the men, anyway. The point of this is that the more data you have, the more connections you can make. And that's super interesting in the world of wearable technology and the worlds of robotics, for example. Because the more little bits of information you get, the more use you can make from it. So for example, I'm wearing an Apple Watch at the moment, and this watch constantly takes my pulse rate. And it also knows where I am from GPS and from my calendar, and it knows that when I'm having meetings with somebody from my calendar, and it knows who that person is from my LinkedIn account. And it knows lots about those people from social media. And now, all those little bits of information are very useful, but they're all publicly available. You can all go out and sort of look each other up. I'm sure you do. Before you have a meeting with somebody, you'll Google them, right? But you only need a little bit more information, and suddenly all of that data suddenly becomes very, very useful. So something that isn't available yet for the Apple Watch, but I guarantee you will be out by Christmas. And if it's not, we're all getting together and we're going to make this. Okay? Something that is about to arrive, almost inevitably, is a pulse rate monitor which links to LinkedIn. Now, why would we want this? Well, we know for a fact, medical fact, that when you're in a meeting with somebody who's being annoying, your heart rate goes up. Now imagine if everybody in this room was wearing an Apple Watch or a Jawbone 3 or a Fitbit or one of those other devices which takes your heart rate. And you all connected those devices to a cloud-sourced application which knew who you were meeting with and was able, by monitoring your vital signs, to decide whether or not that person was an asshole. We could have the world's greatest crowdsourced arsehole detector ever made. Just through that additional little bit of information that was now available through devices like this. And very rapidly, when you start to think about this, and especially about the latest technologies that are available in the stores today, you realize there's a huge amount of potential for additional bits of data to be farmed from all sorts of different things, to create a much wider picture of your world, you know? But I don't think the biggest advance in this, the biggest intimacy is in these wearables. The vast majority of wearables, the Fitbits and the Jawbones and so on, are really just jewelry worn by middle-aged men to remind them they're going to die soon. You know, I'm getting fat, I need to go for a run, I can't be asked, so I'll buy a thing that makes me look as if I do. And it's techie, you know, it's cool. It's in black rubber. It must mean I'm extreme. Awesome. No, actually, the real power is, come on, it's true, isn't it? All these people, oh, I've counted the number of steps I've done. Aren't I an athlete? No, you're not. I've made 5,000 steps today. Oh. Honestly, I can't read my handwriting. Oh, yeah. No, the most important thing isn't about monitoring yourself. We can monitor everything about ourselves. There are plenty of gadgets you can go out and buy today. I was walking down George Street yesterday, and there are about 4 shops on George Street alone where you can buy stuff that monitors everything about you. But that's not really the interesting data we want. The most interesting data, the most interesting stuff in our lives is actually about the intimacy of personal relationships. And those most important personal relationships are the personal relationships we have at home and with our family. And this is starting to become a very big deal. Because as was said in the introduction, for the past year or so, I've been living with a considerable amount of smart, intelligent stuff in my house. Apart from the humans, just the stuff, the gadgets. Been living with a lot of robots and connected systems. And some of them are very simple. For example, all of the light bulbs I have in my house are connected to the internet, which seems just to make it quite difficult to turn all the lights off at night. You have to have your phone with you at all times, and you turn your lights on. And it's quite cool, though, because you can fade them up and down, you can change their colors, and you can match the lighting in your house to the sunset outside the window, and you can connect your phone to your television so that when there are explosions or the lights flash, it's pretty, they're kind of cool things. And you can set triggers, so if you've got an email from somebody important, like a specific table lamp will flash red, and if it's going to rain the next day, then the light next to the umbrella goes green. I spent hours setting this up. It's very expensive. And when you connect it to the internet, what you realize is you can control the lights from anywhere on the planet that you have an internet connection. I know this because last year, when I had this thing installed for the first time, I was on a flight from Stockholm to Berlin. And Stockholm to Berlin, on Air Norway, they have Wi-Fi on the flight. And I'd never been on a flight that had Wi-Fi before, and it was very cool. And I had my iPad, and I was iMessaging with my wife. Hello, hon. And I was also playing with lots of other things on my iPad. And I got a message back from her saying, what are you doing? Nothing. Why? I don't know what you're doing with the lights, but fucking stop it. It's like a disco in here. From 30,000 feet. Oh, okay. Now, this enables... Now, I learned my lesson, and, we don't mess with her, so it's cool. But having these lights being controlled by the internet has enabled me to have a sort of ambient awareness. I know when it's going to rain, or I know how full my inbox is, or how urgent a particular work situation is or not, simply by the color of lights around my house. And after a very short period of time, I stopped being consciously looking at them, but I was just ambiently aware. I would walk into the kitchen, and the light would be green, and I'd be like, oh, okay, email, right, yeah, whatever, coffee first. But it would be an ambient awareness. And so I have become, in some way, through those systems, part of the internet. I am becoming cyborg simply by the lighting in my house. Now, that's pretty cool, pretty useful. But other changes come upon you as well when you have devices like this. I have a robotic floor cleaning robot. It's robotic. It's a robot that cleans the floor. And it's quite cool, and it sort of sits like a little tea tray on wheels with a wipey pad thing, and it goes around the house, and it cleans the floor, and then it goes back to its little home. And it can't yet plug itself back in again. So it sort of beeps at you plaintively. Now, after a couple of days of this, I've started to talk to the thing. Because its beepy noise is quite sad. And when you fully charged it and you set it on its way and you say, go clean the floor, little lad, go. And it goes, ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba, and it goes. And it's silent, so it goes around the house, and it's quite nice, but about 2 hours later, the floor's perfectly clean, and it comes back, and it's like, boo, boo, boo. And if you don't plug it back in again, after a while, it's like, boo, boo, boo. You're like, oh, I'm sorry. And then about a week ago, I was walking into my bedroom, and I opened the door, and the floor cleaning robot was just inside the door, just turning away from the door. And I went, oh, sorry, and shut the door and walked out. It's like the most British thing you can do, right? I apologize to the robot. But it started to take on a personality, and I'm genuinely worried about the day that it breaks. Because one day I'm going to have to bury him. This is a problem. Now, other things are increasingly useful as well. You have a thing, for example, I have lots and lots of these devices because Tim Cook keeps making them shit. And so I have lots of them. And they're around the house. And with the latest version of iOS, when they're plugged in, Siri works all the time. You just shout at it from across the room, hey, Siri, so I've got lots of Siris around the place, and they're all set to different voices, so I know which one's talking to me. And Siri, it's not that sad. Come on. Siri is very useful now, and if you're, as you're about to find next month, or if you're running the beta version today, Siri is actually incredibly powerful and incredibly useful, and it's been very useful being here in Sydney. I've asked it where to go to eat and things like that. Super useful. And there are many of these artificial intelligent personas coming out. There's Siri, there's Cortana for Microsoft devices, there's Google Now. This morning, Facebook announced one. It's going to be called M, and it will be a text-based one built into Facebook Messenger. It's a very cool interface. And certainly over the next few years, you will find yourself having conversations with sultry-voiced computer AIs, because they're being built into pretty much everything. One of the things you start to notice, however, is that the personality of that device really does matter. Siri is kind of funny. You can tell Siri jokes. You can be sarcastic to Siri, and it'll be sarcastic back. If you ask Siri to divide 0 by 0, which you should do later, it basically insults you. It says something like 0 divided by 0. What, like the number of friends you have? It does, it's hilarious. But I think the most impressive one of these devices is a thing called an Amazon Echo. They've come onto the market in the US. I think they're coming here. They're available, increasingly available, imported, and so on. And the Amazon Echo, for those of you who haven't seen it, is a thing about the size of a Pringles can. It's about yay big. It's black. It looks super cool. It's got a blue light that flashes on the top of it. And you have it plugged in anywhere in your house. And it's like a super Siri, but it's designed specifically to just be in the room. And you call it a Lexer. So you can be anywhere. You can be like one side of the room, and it'll be over there. And you say, hey, Alexa, what's the weather today? And it will go, boom, and it will light up blue, and it'll tell you what the weather's going to be. And then you can say, hey, Alexa, add cornflakes to my shopping list. And it goes, bing, and then when you go back onto Amazon, you find cornflakes are in your shopping cart, and things like this. And you can use it to query Wikipedia and find out what the news is, and you can listen to the radio on it. Hey Siri, play Radio National, and suddenly Radio National comes up. Siri's kind of awesome. Once you get over the creepy thing of a device from Amazon sitting in the corner of the room listening to you at all times, which admittedly is a little bit creepy, but we'll skip over that. Siri listens to you the entire time and has very useful use cases. And I suddenly realized the point of these use cases a few days ago. A few days after I got the Echo. I have an 11-month-old daughter who you may see crawling about later this afternoon. And I get up every morning, I get her out of her cot, carry her into the kitchen, get her milk ready, make a cup of tea for my wife. I've got my full hands walk back, distribute liquids to everybody who wants them. I'm a very nice husband, right? Tell her this, okay? She's on stage later today, just remind her. Now, the point of the Echo is that I'm in the kitchen with a baby in one hand and a cup of tea in the other, and I wanted to turn the lights off and turn the radio on, and I told Alexa to do that, and it happened. And then I checked my calendar by asking, what have I got on my calendar today? And then I remembered that I'd run out of cornflakes, and so I added cornflakes and more milk to the shopping list, all by talking to the thing. And I realized that at that point, that was when the future had happened. That I had an artificial intelligence in my house, not in my pocket. And that I had an artificial intelligence that I could talk to as I was carrying my child around. And it was no longer an interesting technology for a, dashing technologist about town, flying off to San Francisco and being efficient. No, it was about a dad in his pajamas being a bit bleary, trying to work out how he's going to make coffee with the extra hand he hasn't got. And suddenly you have new technologies that are more impressive in the context of the family and the context of the community rather than in the context of the individual. And this, I would say, is the real breakthrough of the past few years. But there is a problem. We don't yet, as a community, as individuals, know how to react to these devices. We have an argument in our house about the Amazon Echo, because when you're holding Ripley, my daughter, and you're speaking to the strange box in the corner, you're having a conversation with the wall as far as she's concerned. She's not yet one, but she's looking at me like, what the hell are you doing, Dad? There's no one there. Who are you talking to? And with Siri, when you say thank you to Siri, Siri says, no, it is I who must thank you, or some other bullshit, right? But when you say thank you to the Amazon Echo, it doesn't reply. And so I've realized that I can't use the Echo in front of my daughter in the same way as there's no way I can be rude to a waitress in front of her or rude to anybody in front of her. Because what am I teaching my child as I converse with the robot that's forcing me to be rude to it? And so this leads us to a challenge. And it's the real challenge of innovation in 2015 and 2016. 20 years ago, we used to think of technology as something that was used by one person. And then about 15 years ago, there was the start of what was called the social software movement. And social software was software which was designed to be used by groups of more than one. Email, for example, was suddenly realized to be a social thing. But then you had message boards and chat rooms and all of these things. Software that was be used by groups of people. In the same way as that, we have realized that there is hardware that started off being used by individuals. And now we have hardware and software that is to be used in the context of the community, used into the context of the family. And we don't yet, as a society, know how to talk about that. We don't yet understand how to critique this technology. It feels weird to be having a conversation about how to talk to the artificial intelligence that lives in our kitchen in a way that my child won't learn bad manners from. But it is a situation which is happening right now. And over the next few years, maybe for Christmas, maybe for your birthday, maybe for a bonus, who knows, you may get a cool bit of tech in the next 12 months, which will enable you to have those sorts of conversations, have those sorts of interactions with technology in a much wider context. Most of those interactions will be bad, because we as people have yet to understand how to talk about those interactions at all. And so what I'd like to see over the next couple of years, before I come back to Wired for Wonder 5 with my iPhone 9, will be for everybody here who uses technology, who innovates with it, who commissions it, who builds it, or just who lives with it, to start to talk about what this technology does, not for you as an individual or for you as an employee, but for you as a member of a much wider group. Everything you saw yesterday and everything you see for the rest of today needs to be critiqued not just as a cool piece of tech, but as something that lives within the context of your wider lives. If you can do that, and you can do it sensibly, you won't be sworn at 30,000 feet for turning your kitchen into a disco. Thank you very much.